And the three key elements include plots, quotes, and meta-language. So for example, when we're talking about the plots, we're not just talking about this happened, the other thing happened. That's not just the case. If we really want to do a nice text response analysis, you would just need to link the plots together. So basically what you will need to do is to identify the logical relationship, the connections behind the plots. So or you could just say that we're trying to find out the causal relationships between different plots, because a lot of the times a consequence usually comes after something took place earlier. And so that is what we need to focus on about plots. So for example, in Animal Farm, we can talk about why the piggies are oppressing the other animals, the civilian animals. There is usually a reason. There are usually some reasons. Behind that sort of prompts. And you just need to identify all those reasons, right? And then when we're talking about the quotes, here's an interesting one. The animals, in order to maintain a society, they have made some rules. For example, at the beginning, they would just say that 2 legs bad, 4 legs good. That is actually something like a motto or something like a slogan for all the animals to follow. It actually works quite well at the beginning because they needed solidarity at in that stage so that they could stand together and fight back against the oppressive human beings. And but then definitely it changes slowly, because at the end of the story, the commandment this time, it says 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, 2 legs better. So basically this time, this is because at the end of the story, the pigs eventually stood up and started walking with 2 legs, just like the human beings used to do. So it's kind of like telling you something about a cycle and an endless cycle. And the reason why they're using the commandments this time is that they're using it as a justification for themselves. So they're using the commandment to legitimize their decisions, their rights, and most importantly, their privileges. And lastly, when we're talking about meta-languages, we can use things other than, so we can start from the meaning of the word meta-language. What does it mean by meta-language? So meta means something beyond. So it is not just the language itself. It's about the techniques, the things implied by the superficial language. And I'll just use the windmill as a symbolism, as an example here. So basically, the windmill in the text, the pigs actually had different ideas about it from the beginning to the end. At the beginning, they would say, some pigs would say they would highly recommend the construction of the windmill, but later they decided that no, it's not a good idea. It's actually a voice raised by another party. And so here we can just say that it is more like a symbol of the conflict between the two about whether the windmill works for the animals or not. The question itself doesn't seem to be important as much. So basically here are the elements. And then we're going to talk about the word response. What does it mean by response? So basically, when you're analyzing, when you're doing a text response, you need to have a goal. You need to have something in mind. Your eventual goal is to reflect upon and analyze the themes and historical background of the text. So basically, the story is not just telling you a story. It's not just for entertainment. I know some of the stories do, some of the texts do, but like usually, if your school has chosen this text, they're choosing it for a reason. So basically, they always have a clear goal in their minds, what they want you to understand, what they want you to learn from the themes, from the historical backgrounds of this story. I'll just give you some of the messages, some of the examples here. So the first one would be the selfishness of humanities that lies in human nature that would never change. So for example, in Animal Farm, if you take a close look at the details of the plots, you're going to find out that it's not that the pigs are the only ones who are being selfish. So basically, all the rest of the animals are following the pigs because their decisions, their leadership are effective for them. So it actually brings them some benefits as well. So it follows their interests. It actually satisfies their interests as well. So that is why they would agree with the pigs, and eventually the power actually corrupts, right? So when we're saying, so always be careful when we're talking about selfishness, try not to just to talk about the pigs. Try to extend it a little bit and talk about the rest of the animals as well. It's just going to make it much clearer. And also we can talk about the corruption of power, which the reasons are just explained earlier. And the last part, you can also match some of the characters with the historical figures in during Soviet Union period. And here are the things we need to mention about response. And the last thing I want to highlight, and that's the reason why I would put text and response together. So when we're talking about text response, basically what we're talking about is logical flow. So, I mean, please make sure that you're not just talking about a prompt, you're not just repeating it. You're not just making your own statements while you're straying away from the original prompt. Because if you, like sometimes my students would have some really nice points, but the only case is that they haven't linked it back to the prompt. And eventually they got a mark that really disappointed them. So it definitely happens a lot. So basically what I want to say is that the priority, the most important criteria for a text response essay is that it is responding to the prompt. So basically your points, your arguments, they don't have to be perfect, but you need to make sure that they are talking about something about the prompt instead of about something you just wanted to talk about. All right. And so how about if we go through an example here? Here's a prompt. It says, Orwell suggests that it is impossible to achieve equality. Discuss. Definitely the first step is to highlight the keywords, which are impossible, and achieve equality here. And definitely if you really want to avoid, so before you start thinking about the characters and the plots related to this prompt, I want you to stop for a while, because that is not the original order to answer a question. Just think about your daily life. You're not answering any questions by just like searching your memories, and you just say, wait, let me check my memories, let me check my past, and then I can answer you. It's just not really the case, right? So usually, if we really want to write something in depth, we need to start from some exploration of the meaning of the words or your own definition of the word. So for example, the word that is worthwhile of exploration is equality. So basically, what you need to first think about is what exactly is equality. Like for different people, it has different meanings. Equality, for me, I guess it means that if I just put in the same efforts, I will receive the same results, although it may be a wrong, it may not be the fact, right? But that is my point. So you will need to actually find out your own definition of the word equality. And so please don't skip that part. Don't skip that step before you actually start to explore the prompt. And the next step, you will need to think about something called like why it becomes impossible. So after we understand what it means by the word equality, when you think about, so since it is such a nice thing, it is something everyone would desire, then why would it collapse? Or like, why would it become impossible? Definitely about the things I've just mentioned earlier, you can mention them here. It's about the selfishness of humanity. It's about the cycle. It's about the different interests held by different groups. All those sort of things can be used here to answer the question, to answer the word impossible. And the last and also something I need to remind you, always remember that in your analysis, eventually you will need to link back to the prompt, or link back to the theme and the historical background. Because as I said earlier, those are the things usually delivered through a text. So you can't just talk about the plots, you can't just talk about the characters, because that is not the gist, that is not what the text is talking about. So you will always need to talk about the themes and the social backgrounds. And about that part, I will make sure that I make a video later to explore it in more details. All right. And the last thing, when we're talking about this prompt, we can talk about how. So basically, how does it gradually collapse? Equality at the beginning, it is just there. They've achieved it, right? But why wouldn't it last? Why couldn't it sustain? That is something you can think about. And one of the suggestions here is that you can separate your essay, you can separate the plots into different stages. So for example, at the beginning, all the animals supported the pigs, right? But then later, the situations actually got worse. So that is something you can think about. Why would it be nice at the beginning? Why would the rest of the animals support them at the beginning? And why would it eventually collapse? What are the differences in between different stages? What are the causes of the changes? So basically, by making sure that you cut down the big story, the general broad story into small pieces, you're going to find the interrelationship, the inner connections between the different stages, the actions and the consequences of different animals, different characters.